The Life of Nelson Mandela. Learn English through Story-Graded Reader. Listening practice. It was a cold morning in Kunu, a small village in South Africa, when a boy named Rolihlahla was born. No one could have guessed that this child, who would later be given the name Nelson, would one day become a symbol of freedom and forgiveness for the entire world. He was not born into comfort or power, but into struggle, into a world divided by color, hatred, and fear. As a young boy, Nelson Mandela loved playing in the fields, listening to stories by the fire, and learning from the elders of his village. His father, a respected leader, taught him about justice, respect, and standing up for what was right. But tragedy came early. When Nelson was just 9 years old, his father passed away. Grief hit hard, but it also set Nelson on a new path. He was sent to live with a royal family in another part of the country, where he received a better education and learned more about leadership. As Nelson grew older, so did his dreams. He wanted to help his people, who lived under the heavy weight of apartheid, a cruel system that separated black people from white people and took away their rights. Black South Africans could not vote, could not go to good schools, could not live where they wanted. It was a prison built without bars, and Mandela could no longer stay silent. He studied law and became a voice for the voiceless, defending those who had no one else. He joined the African National Congress, a group fighting for the rights of black people. At first, they tried peaceful protests, marches, and petitions. But the government responded with violence, arrests, and more rules. Mandela and others were beaten, hunted, and watched every day. But he did not give up. Then came the darkest chapter of his life. In 1962, Mandela was arrested. The government called him a traitor. In truth, he was a patriot who loved his country more than his own life. He stood in court, facing a sentence of life in prison, and said words that would echo through history. "I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." He was locked away in a tiny cell on Robben Island for 27 years. Imagine it, waking up every day behind bars, not knowing when you might be free again. He worked in a quarry under the hot sun. He was allowed one letter every 6 months. He missed seeing his children grow up. But even in prison, he did not break. He read, he wrote, he studied, he inspired. And slowly, the world began to listen. Outside the prison walls, the world changed. Protests erupted across continents. Musicians, politicians, and ordinary people began to chant, "Free Nelson Mandela." The pressure on the South African government grew stronger each year. And then, after almost 3 decades, a miracle happened. On February 11, 1990, Nelson Mandela walked free. But here is where the story becomes truly extraordinary. Mandela could have chosen anger. He could have called for revenge, but instead he chose peace. He spoke of reconciliation, of building a new South Africa together. He invited his enemies to sit at the same table. In 1994, in the first free election in South African history, Nelson Mandela became the country's first black president. The boy from Kunu, who had once herded cattle, became the father of a nation. As president, he worked to heal the wounds of the past. He created the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where people could speak about the pain they had suffered or caused and find forgiveness. He stepped down after 1 term, refusing to hold on to power. He became a symbol of dignity, strength, and humanity. And though he passed away in 2013, his legacy still lives on. Schools, streets, books, and hearts across the world carry his name. Nelson Mandela taught us something simple, yet powerful, that no matter how dark the night, the morning always comes. That courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. That true leadership begins with love, not hate. His life reminds us that even when the world feels broken, there is always hope. And sometimes, all it takes to change the world is one person who refuses to give up. So, whenever you feel lost, whenever the road seems too hard, remember the life of Nelson Mandela. Let his story remind you, you are stronger than your pain, braver than your fear, and more powerful than your past. Because like him, you too can rise.